All right, so I'm putting out version 1.5 of my config helper tool. Now, this is still in alpha testing, but I've added a ton more functionality. What I'm trying to do with this tool is to make it even easier to build your config, to go through all the possible features and options, to set up your presets, and to have everything ready to program your board. And now I've also added direct connection to Fredrik's web programmer. If you haven't seen that, it actually allows you to program your Proffieboard right from the website without Arduino, without worrying about Zadig. So I've got a connection for that I'm going to show you. And then on top of it, because of all the customization in Proffi, getting a actual user's manual for the end user can be a little bit tricky because there's so many props, there's so many capabilities in those props, etc. So I've actually created documentation that gets generated based on the selections you make. So the idea for this tool is kind of twofold, but it's for new users who aren't quite sure how to build the config or who don't get the syntax right or just have difficulty. But it's also for people who maybe aren't familiar with everything, and that includes people who've been using Proffi for a long time. So many new features have been added. I mean, the speed of going from OS 3 to OS 4 to OS 5 to OS 6, the number of features grew exponentially. And there's people who've been using Proffieboard for years, and I find in talking to them, they actually don't know all of the features. They don't know all of the defines. They don't know how to do certain things, or they didn't know certain things existed. So the idea for this tool is to make everything as visible as possible. And as I've mentioned in the first video, the concept for this actually came from what I'm working on for OS 7 with Fredrik. In OS 7, I plan to have even more customization for controls and features. And in order to make it more visible to everybody, I wanted to have a tool like this. So I got to work on it, and it actually kind of grew from that. But now it's available for OS 6. I actually like to get it fully tested in OS 6. And then what we'll do is when OS 7 is about to be released, we'll add all those OS 7 features. But the idea is, whether you're new or old, this tool should help you be able to get everything you want out of the config file, out of your Proffieboard, and get ready to program your board. And then now we've got two ways to program it. If you're comfortable with doing Arduino, or if you want to learn that way, I still think that's pretty straightforward and easy, but some people have difficulty. But now we're also hooked into Fredrik's web programming capability, where all you need is a data cable and you hook up your board, and his website actually does the programming for you, as long as you have a config built. So the config file, for those of you who are brand new to Proffi, who aren't fully familiar, it's really just a recipe. So what it is you're going to build an operating system for your board. What goes into that operating system is completely unique to your Saber. Unless somebody has your config file, they never actually have the exact same operating system you have. And that's part of what makes Proffieboard so flexible is really when you build that config file, the top section that has all the defines, which we'll take a look at, that's telling the Arduino or the web programmer what programs to put on the board to do those operations. When you build presets with fonts and styles, you're telling the board what kind of effects you want visually, and then where to find the sound effects, which are stored on your SD, as well as your button configuration, how the blades are wired. All that other information is part of your config. So when you load up your config file, either through Arduino or the web programmer, you're actually giving a completely unique recipe that makes your board and your Saber unique to you. And we don't. The other nice thing about it is, if you think about like other boards that would be what they call closed source, they have to account for all options that any user would want. So, like if they have a rainbow style, that has to be on that board physically. Now, if you don't like rainbow styles and you have a different board, the rainbow style is taking up space on that board. It has to, because it has to be there in case somebody wants it. With the open source board, with Proffieboard, if you don't pick a rainbow style, we don't allocate memory for a rainbow style. You never have to worry about losing that space for a rainbow style. And that space that might have been used elsewhere is now available to you to add a different style that you do want. So that's where that building those presets and building those styles come in. And because of all the style capabilities of Proffieboard, you can really get some unique to you, completely custom built styles, effects, and everything. And that stuff too, OS 7 is going to take that like to the nth degree. So these tools are going to be even more powerful going into the future, but I think they'll be really helpful now. So I'd like to get people in testing. Again, it is alpha testing. Any issue at any point, just click this link and report it to me. I've been doing everything I can to debug it, but there's going to be scenarios I didn't count for. There's going to be uses I didn't think of. And there's always going to be the possibility of typos, just because this is actually a pretty big lift in terms of what it's doing. But that being said, I'm not going to run through every option. So take your time with this tool. I've written everything in that I thought would help anybody, be it brand new or a seasoned Proffi user, to get the most out of it. But you're going to have to read. And there's a lot of information depending on the options you're going to choose, what you're looking for. So just take your time. That being said, this tool is meant to help you get a full config. There's one piece that you do have to come with, and that's going to be the original config from whoever installed your saber, or if you installed it yourself, or if you bought it secondhand. They need that original config. The reason for that is this blade config section here, and we'll talk about what's above it, but this is actually telling the board how everything is wired. And in the world of Proffi, anything that has lights, and or if you have a motor, anything that's getting power and commands from the board is considered a blade. So if you have, you might have a saber that only has one neopixel blade on it, but you've got accents, crystal, you have a crystal chamber, you might have some accent LEDs, you might have the LEDs on your PCB. Those are all also called blades in the world of Proffi. So if you weren't familiar with that, sometimes it's confusing for people. All that information is in the blade config. So we're going to take a quick look. So you do need this. Now, if you bought the saber from an installer, they should be giving you a copy of the config. Anybody who knows anything about Proffi knows how important the config file is. If, for some reason, you bought a Proffieboard saber from somebody or some vendor and they didn't give you a copy of the config file, ask for it right away. There's no reason not to include it, and it is necessary for you because it is have important information. But we're going to rebuild the config with the tool. The only real information we need is two pieces. You need to know how many blades you actually have, how many buttons you actually have. That's right here at the top. That's going to be on every config file. And then all the way at the very bottom, doesn't matter what's in between, you're going to find this blade config section, and it ends with this #endif. That's the piece that my tool can't do for you. There's just too many variables. This is telling the board how everything's wired, how many pixels are in it, etc. This information you do have to have from the original config file from whoever installed your saber. There are ways to get it, but it just makes it more complicated. You're going to want this. So we're going to highlight this. I'm going to copy this. And you can use Control-C or whatever method is easy for you. And then we're going to paste that right here. Okay? That's the only external piece you really need besides knowing about your saber. Everything else you're going to be able to do from the tool. I do have an example here on what you're grabbing. I have a lot of information about it. If you're brand new and building your own saber, these are the links to Fredrik's configurator tool, or you can look at the manual. But you do have to provide this, and it has to be correct. If you have a mistake within the blade config file, this tool is not going to see it. It's not going to know it's a mistake. You'll have to troubleshoot that externally. So this is a 2-blade saber, so I do also have to change my number of blades to 2. Now, always, anytime, the number of blades has to match how many blades are in this define within this blade config, all right? If you have a difference of the number of blades that are here and the number of blades that are actually in that blade config, when you go to upload and compile, you're going to get an error message as well. Again, the blade config is the only piece that this tool needs to be accurate and come from an external source. But again, that should be coming from your installer. So that being said, you can now look through everything else going forward and set up your saber how you want. So as I said, we want to know how many buttons are in it. Mine are 2. If you want to switch the buttons, you can toggle them. Now, this has to be either or though. So if you have a 2-button setup and you wanted the power button to be the aux button, you would flip it here, and this will change that to the power button. But if your aux 2 pin, which is technically the 3rd button, isn't actually wired and you choose it, the button's not going to get recognized. So that's the only piece of the puzzle that technically you want to look at your original config. These would be the 2 pins right here that your buttons are wired to. So if you choose the 3rd pin, but there's nothing wired to it, there's no button technically going to do anything. But you don't have to input this info. This is the only thing you got to grab from the old config for me. This stuff gets handled by the tool now. And then we can set our volume. That's your default volume. Obviously, if you choose the my prop, which this is going to recommend because of all the features, you can use the volume menu and adjust that anytime. This becomes the maximum volume. There's a number of options that you can set and set values for. Anything that's unchecked is a feature that you can enable. So I enable the basic stuff by this tool that almost everybody's going to want and use. but there's a lot of options that you can pick and choose from. So read through everything. Anything you want, you would check off. Anything you don't want, you leave unchecked. But read each of these selections and the description so you understand what it is. And this will help you find features that maybe you didn't know Proffi offered. So I'm going to actually choose the multi-phase. I'll activate edit mode. Now that's option. If you don't want to use edit mode, you can still do editing through Proffios Workbench. Just look up the information on that. But for our purposes of setting that up, I'm going to activate dual mode sound and real class sound. And we'll do the colorless stuff. I'll put on a spoken battery. And then we can activate. So, and again, read through all of these settings and information because you are making your saber how you want it to be. And I'm going to activate some gestures. And there's different controls for these gestures. So just, again, read through how you want the gestures to work. And then we'll do a force push. And then there's a bunch of other options. And then once you've made all these selections that you want, you're going to come down here and we're going to actually start building your presets. And that's where you set up the fonts and the styles to make the saber do stuff. This section should be done after you've set everything above it, particularly your number of blades. The number of presets, the number of styles in the preset has to match the number of blades. If you go and change the number of blades at any point after you've added presets, it's going to clear it because it needs you to redo that. And you can add as many presets as you want. Now, you are obviously limited by the memory on the board. So if you go to add like 100 presets, you're probably going to run out of space. Depending on the styles you're using and how many blades you have, typically 15 to 20 presets is pretty safe, unless you get like super complex styles and there's a ton of them. But almost all the styles in my library have been optimized to fit as much as possible. I'm also going to show you a little trick right now because this saber has 2 blades, but one of them is an accent crystal. And you can actually save a lot of memory if you do this little trick. But for our purposes, I'm going to set up the preset. You do obviously want to read, again, everything. The font name has to match the font folder on your SD card. I happen to know mine, so I'm going to type that. I also happen to know my tracks. You're going to want to know your track location. This is the default track. With my prop and track player, you can actually have multiple tracks. They just have to be within the font and then /tracks folder. And the tracks can be named whatever you want, but I know these as well. And then what we're going to do now is we're going to get some styles. So you can get them from my library, or you can build your own in editor. So we're going to go to the style library. This happens to be a Fallen Order saber, so I'm going to go grab the Cal Kestis style. I'm going to start off in blue. Again, with all the editing capabilities in OS 6, you don't actually have to pick every individual color you want. You can edit them in the future, but if you want to add options, so if I wanted to add like some preon effects, I can actually build an option list of preon effects. And you can go through and you can set whatever you want. And I'm not going to go through all of this. The library, you could spend a day in there looking at all the options. You're going to build out what you want in terms of all the style capabilities and everything else. And then we're going to click Get Style Code. This is an agreement that you're going to keep my copyright intact because I've spent a lot of time building all of these styles. And then once it's in your clipboard, so you see here it says it's in my clipboard. Now it's ready to go over to my blades. And blade 1 in my setup is my main blade. And that, again, is in that blade config section that you have to get from your original. So I'm going to paste it here. And paste that code. And now this is my second style. So my second style is for my accents. And accents, typically, they're simpler styles. And usually, because they're simpler, you can actually share them over a number of presets. If you share the same accent style over a number of presets, you can actually save memory to fit more on the board. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to just, for our purposes, just set up like 3 presets. I'm going to go build out what we call an option style in the library for my accent, and I'm going to reuse it. So I'll go back to the library. We're going to close this. In the library, there's these buttons for accent LEDs or for crystal chamber. Crystal chamber and accents are kind of interchangeable. Basically they have styles that are a lot simpler than what you put on a full-length NeoPixel blade. But I'm going to go in and we'll choose here. And now to build out an option style, and this is also for your main blade. You can build out option styles for your main blade. But what we're going to do is I'm going to go here. I'm going to actually build a custom on effect. And you can choose from a really long list of effects to run on your accent crystals. And by each one of these is an option, which means that I can use this same preset on, or this same style on multiple presets, but each preset, if you change the options, it'll actually look different on each one. Plus, because you can edit each color, you can actually take a single style, and this will show us in a second. Let me build this out. But I can actually take one style and build out, I'm just kind of randomly picking here, but you can preview all of them and see which ones you want. I'm going to build out like that. And then same thing when the saber is off. You can actually set up different options for what you want the accent or crystal to do while it's off. And again, I'm just kind of picking some random stuff. And there's a lot of options, so you can look through all these. And then this will show us here. And then you can set your colors and everything. But now, if you look here, this one style, and all I did was set up I set up the on and the off behavior, but this style has 36 combinations. That means I can take this single style, I'm going to paste it in my presets, but by going in either through edit mode or the workbench, I can actually turn it into 36 completely unique looking presets, plus all the colors. You can pick any color you want on any preset. So all of a sudden, this single style for my crystal, or for my accent, which I'm going to copy, if I paste it into all of the second blades, which are the accents of these, I'm not only saving memory, but I'm giving myself more ability to fit more main blade styles. So anybody with crystals or accents, I really recommend using option styles from the library for them because of the memory saving. Because now this is, every time you repeat the exact identical style in multiple presets, the OS almost uses negligible amount of memory to store it. And that is what allows us to then have more unique main styles. So let's go build out 2 more main styles. So I'm going to close this up, and I'm just going to, I'll do an audio flicker just so we can, because I know I'm kind of talking for a while. Again, you would choose out all your options that you'd want and everything, but we'll paste that, and then we'll grab just like we'll grab an unstable from here. And again, the colors are technically editable anyway, but we'll just do it, right unstable. And again, you can build out however you want. You can get as crazy as you want with the styles and the options. But now I've got all my presets set up. I didn't set up my other fonts. So you're going to obviously want it, as you do it, you want to make sure you're setting up your font names correctly and your track names correctly. And you can do this also just by looking at your SD card to see what the folder names are. But let's see, and then we'll go this one. We'll do so that. Okay. And now, and again, you can build out more. I'm just, for our purposes, I'm going to do it. So now I've built my presets. I've set up all my options, going through all my defines. I set up my blade config. Now I'm ready to just generate this config and get it uploaded. So this is where the new features are coming in. Again, make sure you're reading everything as you go through it. You do want to start at the top, fill out everything before you come down here, but I'm going to generate a full config. This now creates my full config for me based on all the options I set up. And I can just, if you're used to using Arduino, if you read through the updating Proffieboard instructions, all you need to do is copy this config that was just generated. So we're going to click copy config. It's going to put that in my clipboard, and you're going to go, now if you have your original config, save a backup. Don't touch it. Whatever came from your installer, save that someplace, save it in a couple places. That is still always going to be important. But what we're going to do is, once I've saved a copy of it, I'm going to select all. I'll do it this way, select all. I'm going to delete it because I don't want, what you don't want to do is you don't want to paste the new config and forget like a comma or something from the old config. So just completely erase the config after you've backed it up, and you're going to save this as a new file, and then we're going to paste, and that pastes my brand new config that I just generated from the tool. And this should have no syntax errors in it. The only possible syntax error would be your blade config section. As I said, this tool can't check that. So if there is an error in the blade config, that will still give you an error message. But everything else from this tool, unless there's a bug, should produce no config errors. So you would then be able to just upload this through Arduino if you wanted to. The second and the new option is also the ability to use Fredrik's web programmer, which, as I mentioned earlier, that just lets you take a data cable and a website, hook it to your board, and upload a config. So to do that, all you do is click, you have to generate the full config, but we're going to click this button. When you click this button, it's actually going to copy the config into your clipboard. In order to use the tool, Fredrik's tool, I have to strip out a bunch of extra spaces and everything. So you're going to want to click this button. It's putting the new config code that'll work with his programmer into your clipboard. And then we're going to just paste that into the web programmer. So here, you're just going to click into the configuration. We're going to click paste. It's got everything stripped out so that it works optimally with his tool. And then you're going to click program. And you're going to select your board and click connect. Now, the web programmer does take time. It takes several minutes to run. Any prompts are going to appear next to the program button. So if it can't see your board, it might, sometimes it asks you to hit the boot and reset button. Sometimes it just gives you, if it gives you an error message, obviously that could be an error coming from the tool since it's an alpha testing, but your messages would be there. But typically what it does is it connects and it starts uploading, and it's going to let you know that it's configuring. The configuring takes time depending on how big your config file is. So it'll say, please wait, just be patient with it. This tool is doing a lot, but it is going to take time. So I'm not going to, for the purpose of our video, I'm not going to hit connect, because once I hit connect, it'll actually upload the program. But this is a great tool if you don't want to touch Arduino, if you're a little nervous about Arduino. But now you have the option to go either way. If you're used to Arduino, or if you read that updating Proffieboard link that I provide, Arduino is not scary. It's pretty straightforward. Usually the first time somebody does it, they forget to define their config file, which we can show you. So your config file would have to be defined right about here. So in my case, actually, I comment in this one, and this is the one I would upload. This is the mistake that most people make. They forget that they have to take these 2 slashes in front of their config in order to upload it. And then the other mistake is that they have errors in their config file, which is why this tool exists, to get rid of any possible errors. A lot of times people just miss a comma, or they forget to put in a font or a track name. The idea for this tool is to take that out of the equation. So now it's really open Arduino. Once you've done Zadig, again, all the instructions are on the updating Proffieboard page. But as long as you define your config, saved it, and upload, Arduino is very easy. It's just the first time around, it's brand new. I understand sometimes people get a little nervous, they're scary. For some reason, there's people out there who make Proffi seem like you have to be like a next level genius computer programmer to use it, when in reality, my 10-year-old son can do it in his sleep. But hey, to each his own. So now you have 2 options. You can use Arduino if you're used to it, if you want to learn it. That's what I still use. Or Fredrik provided a great tool with this web programmer. And now this config helper tool plus the web programmer should make it even easier for anybody to be able to update their Proffieboard. But so that's available. Oh, so one thing, I didn't choose the device. So here's your error messages. But it'll give you messages there. If you have any trouble with this, again, go to the Crucible link on the config helper. If there's an error from the web programmer, there's a separate thread on the Crucible for that. But most likely, because we're still in alpha testing, there could be an error introduced from the config builder. My hope is to get rid of them. But I've talked about that long enough. So the other piece of this, and this is a big piece that I'm proud of, is that based on everything you chose to build your config, the options, the controls, and how your Saber works is completely unique. So I wanted to provide very easy documentation for everybody. So these blue buttons that will appear once you've built a config are your documentation based on all the options you chose. So with the presets, anything coming out of my library, this is where those options in that crystal chamber come into play. So I'm going to click here, and what we do is we produce not only all the instructions. So this is something too. I find a lot of people get a Proffieboard and they either aren't aware of the manual itself or how to actually use it. So I'm putting all the main stuff that I've ever seen people have questions about at the top here. You can print this out. You can also technically, if you have a way to save as PDF, you can do that, but it's going to generate this for you. Then all the options we built. So right here, we've built out our Blade 2 style. right? Yeah, okay, and it lists out all the options I chose. So you can see here I chose all these options. So my pre-on effect, etc. And this is going to give me the options that I've now selected so that I can go in and use them when I go in to edit the presets. So you can choose any of the options, and they're by number. So 0, 1, 2, etc. So this is going to be very useful for you going forward as you use either edit mode or Proffieboard Workbench. But you're going to want to print that out. The next thing is all the controls for your saber are going to vary depending on the options you've selected. So you can print out a full control list, and this is going to list out all of the controls as well as any of the special features you've enabled. So like I enabled gesture sleep, I enabled edit mode. So I'm going to get all of these instructions which are specific to the selections I've made. So you can print this out, and this is to keep, so you have all the controls for your saber all ready for you. And then the last piece of the puzzle, close that, is all of the supported sounds. Particularly if you add certain features, there's ways to set the sounds up. So like you can set up the acceleration-based accent swings that people don't know about, quotes. You can set up a bunch of other features, and this is going to produce the actual supported sounds list as well as all the information you need for your fonts. And you can, again, print these out. So the idea of these three documentations is to make your individual user manual based on the options you've selected. So all of this now gets produced based on just going through the website, picking all your options, building your presets, and generating. But the hope is to make this way easier for everybody, and also make stuff more visible for those of you who maybe haven't followed along with all of the releases, who aren't familiar with all of the finds, who maybe haven't read all the new documentation on all of different releases. I mean, as I said, when OS 7 comes out, there's so much more coming. I wanted to make it even easier for people to keep up with the capabilities of their board and get the most out of it. But this is now up. This is ready to go. It is in alpha testing though, so if you have any problems at all, please, again, use this link and report them. I'll take a look at them as quickly as possible. If you have questions on using anything, of course, you can always ask. But the idea for this tool is to make it so much easier for everybody, as well as just really help new users and old users to get the most out of their Proffieboard. So hopefully it helps somebody. Hopefully you guys enjoy it, and I will talk to you soon.